She thought she could have a black man removed from first class with just a few carefully chosen words until he calmly reached into his pocket and flashed his FBI badge. Patricia Langford glided through Dallas-Fort Worth International with the ease of someone who flew often and always first class. Her designer suitcase rolled behind her like a trusted shadow, and she moved with the kind of confidence reserved for people who never expected to be questioned. The flight from Dallas to D.C. was part of her routine. Early boarding, champagne and crystal, and polished conversation among executives. So when she reached her row and noticed a black man already seated next to her, dressed in a sharp navy suit, calmly typing away on a sleek laptop, something in her rhythm stuttered. He didn't look up. His posture was relaxed but professional, the way someone acts when they belong exactly where they are. Patricia sat down a bit too firmly, her tote bag landing with just enough force to send a message. This wasn't the kind of company she anticipated at 35,000 feet. She adjusted herself, bumping his armrest slightly. No reaction. His attention stayed locked on his screen. Unsettled, she leaned in a fraction and asked, "Are you sure you're in the right seat?" Without even glancing her way, he replied, "Yes." Nothing more. She blinked. Her mouth twitched. Then she raised a hand just enough to flag down the nearby flight attendant, Emily Jacobs, early 30s, composed and pleasant. Daniel, still typing, let out a breath just loud enough to register. "Hi there, is there a problem?" Emily asked kindly. Patricia smiled with a flicker of fake charm. "I think this gentleman might be in the wrong seat. Probably just a mix-up." Emily consulted her manifest, her fingers scrolling quickly across the tablet screen. "Actually," she said after a second, "Mr. Stokes is in seat 2B. Your boarding pass is for 2A. Everything's in order." Patricia blinked again. She said, managing a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "I must have gotten turned around. I just assumed—" Emily gave a gentle nod, catching the undercurrent, but choosing professionalism over confrontation. "No worries, ma'am. Let me know if you need anything else." Then she stepped away. Daniel returned to his work, silent and unbothered. Patricia, however, stared out the window with a practiced smile. But behind it, her thoughts simmered, and she wasn't about to let it go. Her fingers tapped rhythmically on her knee, her breathing uneven, eyes shifting between the flight attendants and the man beside her. He didn't flinch, didn't explain himself, didn't offer a single word to ease her discomfort. And that silence, that quiet composure, made her seethe. She had expected him to defend his presence, maybe even apologize for the mix-up she had imagined. But instead, he gave her nothing, no excuse, no validation. Patricia wasn't used to being ignored, especially not by someone she had silently judged as unworthy of her space. She sat upright, arms crossed tightly, thoughts racing. She'd flown this route for over 20 years and never found herself in a situation that felt so wrong. The man next to her wasn't causing any trouble, but in her mind, he didn't fit. He didn't belong in her world of linen napkins and priority lounges. Her chest tightened, frustration building with every second of stillness. She couldn't let this slide. She reached up and pressed the call button. The subtle chime overhead was followed by the return of Emily Jacobs, who approached with the same practiced grace. "Can I assist you with something, ma'am?" she asked politely. Patricia offered a measured tone, her voice dipped low, masking itself in civility. "I'd like to request a seat change." Emily's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Oh? Is there something wrong with your seat?" Patricia hesitated, her pause just long enough to sound rehearsed. "No, not the seat exactly." She tilted her head toward Daniel and whispered, "I just don't feel comfortable here." Emily's expression shifted slightly, though she remained professional. "I'm sorry to hear that. If it's a mechanical issue, I'd be happy to—" "It's not mechanical," Patricia cut in, her words sharper now. "I just prefer somewhere else." Daniel had paused his typing again, his hands still, his eyes forward. He didn't speak, didn't defend himself, didn't engage. Emily nodded slowly. "Let me see what's available." She tapped her tablet, scanning the seating chart. Meanwhile, Patricia sat rigid, lips pressed in a thin line, eyes darting left and right as she sensed the attention growing. A man a few rows ahead glanced over his shoulder. Across the aisle, a woman gave her husband a pointed look. Whispers were beginning. "Unfortunately," Emily said after a moment, "we're completely full in first class this afternoon." Patricia's heart sank, a flare of heat rushing to her cheeks. "Would you like me to check for a seat in economy?" Emily asked sweetly. That single word, economy, landed like an insult. Patricia's throat tightened. The thought of moving back there was unthinkable. She said flatly. The word almost stuck behind her pride. "That won't be necessary." Emily gave a courteous smile. "Then I hope the rest of your flight is pleasant." She turned and walked away. Patricia didn't respond. Her ears buzzed with quiet rage. Daniel calmly returned to his keyboard, his fingers gliding over the keys without a glance in her direction. That was it. No confrontation, no argument, just silence, as if she were invisible. Her hands clenched, knuckles whitening as her frustration bubbled over. She wasn't finished. With a sharp breath, she reached up and hit the call button again. This time, Emily didn't return as quickly. When she did, her stance was cautious, her tone clipped. "Yes, ma'am?" Patricia sat taller in her seat, voice firmer. "I need to speak to whoever's in charge." Emily stayed composed. "I'm the lead on this flight. What do you need help with?" Patricia didn't blink. "I want to talk to the head crew member, or the captain." A soft rustle moved through the cabin as a few passengers turned to look. Someone let out a soft laugh. Emily's demeanor stayed courteous, but the strain was beginning to show. "The captain is in the cockpit preparing for departure and can't come out, but I'm here to assist you." Patricia's jaw tensed as she glanced sideways at Daniel, who sat calmly, unbothered, not giving her any reaction to feed off. His eyes were forward, hands steady, as if this wasn't his first time dealing with something like this. Her voice dropped to a near whisper. "I don't feel safe." The shift was immediate. Emily's smile vanished, her shoulders squared. Daniel stopped typing. A businessman nearby muttered, "Here we go again," under his breath. Emily responded carefully, tone measured. "Can you clarify what you mean, ma'am?" Patricia's hands folded neatly, her head tilting in a calculated display of concern. "I just don't feel comfortable being seated here." Her pause was deliberate, just long enough to insinuate something deeper without actually saying it. "I'm not trying to cause trouble. I just think it would be better for everyone if this seat went to someone else." Daniel slowly shut his laptop and looked directly at her, silent but unwavering. For the first time, Patricia's confidence wavered. Her words were getting louder now, her posture more rigid. "I don't feel safe." It wasn't shouted, but the impact was the same. Those 4 words carried a dangerous weight. Emily froze. Her gaze flicked to Daniel, who sat perfectly still, watching. He didn't frown or speak. He simply watched. Patricia kept her voice calm but firm, pressing the implication without ever stating it plainly. "I'm just uncomfortable. That's all. And I think I should be allowed to move if I'm uncomfortable." A man across the aisle scoffed. A woman several rows back lifted her phone, discreetly recording. Passengers shifted in their seats, murmuring quietly. Patricia noticed. The room was changing. People weren't with her anymore. But she wasn't letting go. "It's a reasonable request," she insisted. "I'm not asking for anything special, just to be accommodated. If I'm feeling uneasy, surely I have the right to relocate." Emily's jaw was tight. "As I said earlier, first class is full." Patricia's nostrils flared. "What about coach?" Emily hesitated. "There are a couple seats open in economy." Patricia leaned back, her tone brightening. "Excellent, he can go there." The tension in the cabin thickened. Low voices buzzed through the rows. Daniel took a deep breath, tapped his fingers once against his laptop, then fell still again. He didn't argue, didn't flinch, but he also wasn't going anywhere. Emily stared for a beat, as though replaying Patricia's words to make sure she had heard them right. "Ma'am?" Her tone now quieter, steadier. "Just so I understand, you're asking me to move this passenger to coach because you don't want to sit next to him?" Patricia straightened in her seat and nodded once. "Yes." Emily took a slow breath, the kind you take before saying something final. "That's not going to happen." Patricia's head snapped up. "Excuse me?" Emily kept her voice professional, but her spine was steel. "Mr. Stokes purchased a first-class seat. He's sitting in the seat assigned to him. I will not be asking him to move." Patricia's face went red as the whispering around them grew louder. A few passengers were now openly watching, a couple of heads craning over seatbacks. The girl still holding up her phone didn't blink. Patricia's chest tightened. "This is absurd," she muttered. I'm just requesting the same kind of consideration that anyone else would receive if they expressed discomfort. Emily didn't move. You're not asking for a standard courtesy. You're asking me to remove a paying passenger from first class and place him in coach without cause. That's not a request. That's discrimination. The quiet that followed hit like a slap. Somewhere in the back, a man let out a slow, sharp whistle. Daniel still hadn't said a word. He watched her with that same unreadable calm. Patricia's hands gripped the armrests. This wasn't going the way she thought it would. Emily stood taller. Ma'am, we're preparing for departure. If you refuse to follow crew instructions and remain seated, I will have no choice but to ask you to deplane. Patricia's stomach lurched. She breathed. Those are your options, Emily said, still composed but unwavering. You can stay seated or you can leave the aircraft, but Mr. Stokes is not moving. A small ripple of applause came from a few passengers. Patricia's face burned with shame. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. She opened her mouth, ready to push back, but before she could get a word out, Daniel calmly reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a small leather case, flipped it open, and held it up. The badge gleamed. Gold. Real. FBI. The entire energy in the plane shifted. You could feel it in your teeth. A few gasps escaped. Someone laughed. A short, surprised bark. The girl with the phone zoomed in instantly. Daniel didn't raise his voice. Ma'am, he said evenly, tilting his head slightly. Would you like to file a formal complaint? I'd be happy to take your statement. Patricia froze, her breath catching in her throat. Her mouth opened, then closed. No sound came out. Daniel stayed perfectly still, badge visible, voice calm. And just like that, the game had changed. But what Patricia didn't know yet was that this wasn't just going to end in embarrassment. It was about to lead to real consequences. The cabin had gone silent again, but not like before. This silence felt heavier. The weight of judgment. The FBI SEAL caught the cabin lights, impossible to ignore. Passengers stared without hiding it now. Some smirked. Others watched with open mouths. Patricia sat there frozen, her throat dry, her thoughts spinning. She had miscalculated badly, and there was no getting out of it now. The man she'd tried to label as a threat, the man she'd wanted removed from first class, was a federal agent. Her throat closed up. Daniel's face didn't change. No grin, no satisfaction, just steady eyes, FBI badge still visible in his hand, waiting. His voice remained calm and firm. Would you like to file a formal complaint, ma'am? The question landed like a hammer. Patricia froze, heat crawling up her neck. She opened her mouth, but nothing coherent came out. Just a weak, breathy. Daniel didn't flinch. You said you felt unsafe, he continued, voice clipped but polite. That's a serious statement, especially on a federal flight. If you believe I've acted improperly, I'm prepared to document your claim right now. Patricia's stomach flipped. Everything had shifted. Moments ago she'd felt in control, confident that the situation would tip in her favor. She expected nods, support, understanding. But now all eyes were on her, and none of them looked sympathetic. Two rows up, a man chuckled and shook his head. Unreal, he muttered under his breath. The girl with the phone was still filming, her screen angled to capture every second of the fallout. Emily stood nearby, arms crossed, expression unreadable. But the silence in her posture said everything. No one was on Patricia's side anymore. Her breath caught. She couldn't admit she'd lied just to force him out of the seat. But if she pushed forward, if she insisted, she'd be accusing a federal officer of posing a threat mid-flight. And that accusation would come with consequences far beyond embarrassment. Her fingers twitched. Daniel never looked away. Finally, after a long, unbearable pause, Patricia barely nodded. She whispered, "No complaint." Daniel gave a single nod, almost mechanical, like it was the exact answer he expected. Slowly he closed his badge, slid it back into his coat, and opened his laptop again. That was it. It was over, for him. For Patricia, it had only just started. A wave of murmurs passed through the cabin. A few people clapped softly. The man across the aisle returned to his newspaper with a smirk. The girl who'd been recording? She was already typing furiously. Patricia could hear her own pulse thudding in her ears. She wanted to vanish, to rewind time, and erase every word she'd said. But there was no going back now. The damage was done, And the evidence was everywhere, on people's phones, in their memories, and written across her burning face. She scanned the cabin, searching for someone, anyone, who might give her a sympathetic look. No one met her gaze, not even Emily, whose patience had clearly run dry. Patricia sat frozen, mouth dry, hands clenched in her lap. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, to reclaim some sliver of dignity. But she knew, deep down, there was nothing left to say. The flight hadn't even taken off, and somehow she had already lost. And that loss wasn't just in her mind. Patricia stared ahead, stiff in her seat. Her cheeks were flushed, her chest tight. Daniel? He was done with it. He typed like none of it had happened. She wasn't even a thought. But the cabin hadn't moved on. The businessman across the aisle smirked as he adjusted his Bluetooth. The girl with the phone stopped typing, but her camera didn't move. It stayed aimed, just in case Patricia slipped up again. Even the crew members, who were supposed to remain neutral, now carried a different kind of presence around her. Emily, still nearby, watched with a professional calm that barely concealed the shift in atmosphere. Patricia could feel it. The stares, the quiet judgment settling in like fog. She had made a grave miscalculation. Her hands twitched in her lap, and her heartbeat thundered in her ears. This wasn't a minor social misstep she could smooth over with a polite laugh and a dismissive shrug. She had tried, on camera, to have an FBI agent kicked out of his seat, and the weight of that mistake was settling in her chest like stone. Her mouth felt like sandpaper. Emily finally stepped closer, voice still courteous but laced with firmness. "Ma'am," she said low enough that only nearby passengers could hear, "I need to confirm that you're able to remain seated without further incident." Patricia sat up straighter, feeling exposed. Several people nearby turned their heads slightly, pretending to stay uninvolved while clearly tuning in. She wanted to lash out, to protest that she hadn't done anything wrong, but she knew none of that would matter now. Daniel's badge had flipped the script entirely. The control she once held was gone. She forced a neutral expression onto her face. "I'm fine," she answered quietly. Emily held her gaze for a second longer before giving a small nod. "I'll hold you to that." Then she walked off, leaving Patricia frozen in place. She let out a shaky breath, hands clenched together, telling herself it was finished. But she was wrong. A chime sounded from a phone, sharp and mocking in the still cabin air. She looked up just in time to see the young woman with the phone tap her screen and smirk. Patricia's stomach lurched. That look was all too familiar. She'd seen it on her grandkids' faces when they posted something they knew would go viral. Her heart pounded as she leaned slightly, eyes locking onto the girl's phone screen. The video was already live. Her breath caught. The title burned like acid. "White woman tries to kick black man out of first class. He shows FBI badge." The blood drained from Patricia's face. The plane hadn't even taken off, and she had already become the villain of someone else's story. And if it was online, it was out of her control. She faced forward again, trying to steady her nerves, hoping, desperately, that maybe it wouldn't spread, maybe no one would care, maybe it would be forgotten. But then her purse buzzed. Once. Then again. A third time. Her heart squeezed. She didn't want to look. But her hands betrayed her, digging through the bag until her fingers found the phone. Her screen lit up with notifications. Messages from old co-workers, distant cousins, even neighbors she hadn't spoken to in years. All asking the same thing. "Is this you? I just saw something. Tell me this isn't real. What on earth did you do?" Her fingers trembled as she opened Twitter. One tap was all it took. Her name was trending. The clip, posted just minutes ago, already had more than 20,000 views. And the comments, they were endless. Patricia's vision blurred as she scrolled. "This is karma in real time. She picked the wrong man on the wrong day. Enjoy being famous, lady." Her lungs seized. This wasn't a scandal. It was a wildfire, and there was no undo button. Patricia clutched her phone like a lifeline as the noise around her faded. Her reality had shifted. And what awaited her after the flight landed would be worse than anything she imagined. 30,000 views. Then 42,000. It kept climbing, faster than she could process. Patricia blinked hard, her thoughts spiraling as she scrambled for a way out, any possible way to put a stop to it. But it was already too late. She refreshed the screen, scanning the flood of comments. Entitled much? Elmo. She really thought she could pull this off. The FBI reveal? Chef's kiss. This is Karma in HD. Drop her name. People need to know. Her chest constricted. She looked around the cabin again, hoping for a different reaction. But no one was staring at her now. They didn't have to. They already knew who she was. She shifted stiffly in her seat, posture frozen. Daniel remained beside her, unmoved, fingers dancing lightly across his keyboard. If he'd seen the video, he didn't react, and somehow that made everything worse. Her phone buzzed again. She jumped, heart leaping into her throat. A call from her sister. She stared at the screen, then slowly hit decline with a trembling finger. She couldn't face anyone yet. Not family, not even herself. The plane hadn't even touched down, and her life was already unraveling at the seams. She exhaled shakily, trying to think clearly. There had to be a way to salvage this. Maybe she could issue a statement. That would draw more attention. Maybe she could play dumb, say she hadn't seen the video. Worse. Every thought crashed into the next, spiraling into panic. And then, the captain's voice cut through the tension. Ladies and gentlemen, we've begun our descent into Washington, D.C. The local time is 5:43 p.m. Please fasten your seatbelts. Patricia's heart sank like a stone. Descent. She'd been so consumed by the disaster inside the cabin, she hadn't considered what would be waiting on the ground. With a shaky hand, she refreshed the video again. 97,000 views. Her name wasn't just mentioned, it was trending. She stuffed the phone deep into her purse and tried to convince herself that things wouldn't be as bad as they seemed. That maybe this would blow over. That maybe no one would recognize her. But that hope died the second she walked off the plane. She bolted through the gate, ignoring the murmurs and sideways glances, focused only on getting to the baggage area. But just beyond the carousel, her eyes landed on a cluster of reporters. Not dozens, not yet, but enough. A woman in a navy blazer stood with a microphone in hand, reading from her phone while a cameraman rolled beside her. The now viral video shows an unidentified woman attempting to have an FBI agent removed from first class, citing personal discomfort. The clip has already surpassed 1 million views this afternoon. Patricia stopped cold. 1 million. Her breath vanished. She turned sharply, hoping, begging, that no one had noticed her. But it was too late. One of the reporters made eye contact. Her face lit up like a firework. "That's her!" the woman shouted. And just like that, everything collapsed. Patricia spun around, heart pounding like a war drum, and fled. She could not be seen like this. Her heels echoed loudly as she hurried through the terminal, weaving past families and business travelers, heart pounding. She needed to reach the exit, fast. But her phone was going wild in her bag, buzzing nonstop with texts, calls, and notifications. There was no outrunning it now. She pushed past a small crowd, breath shallow, palms slick with sweat. Just as she stepped out to the curb, she heard it. Her name, loud and clear. "Miss Langford, any comment about the video?" Her whole body flinched. She hadn't even realized her identity had gone public. A taxi slowed in front of her, and she dove into the back seat without hesitation. "Drive!" she snapped, barely able to breathe. The driver glanced at her in the rearview mirror but didn't ask questions. As the car pulled away, Patricia leaned back and closed her eyes, pressing trembling fingers to her forehead. 1 million views. The number clanged in her skull. Her life had been built on polished appearances, perfect language, curated events, and well-earned respect. And in just a few hours, all of it had crumbled. Her phone vibrated again, this time a number she didn't recognize. Her thumb hovered over the screen. Then, without thinking, she answered. "Hello?" A moment of silence, then a voice, calm, clipped, professional. "Miss Langford, this is James Rollins, chair of the Marston Foundation. I assume you're aware of what's happened." Her stomach turned to ice. She had served on that board for years, an organization known for its progressive stance, its dedication to equality and justice. She already knew what was coming. "James, But he cut her off. "You'll need to resign, effective immediately." No discussion, no second chances, just a verdict. Her voice caught. "I think this is being misinterpreted." "The board disagrees," he said. "You'll receive the official statement by tomorrow. We expect your resignation by then." The line went dead. Patricia sat frozen, the phone still in her hand. That was it. Career, gone. Reputation, destroyed. And no one was waiting to hear her side. They had seen the footage, and the footage was enough. She let out a slow, broken breath. This wasn't a media hit job. It wasn't a smear campaign. It was her own doing, her own words, her own choices, and now, her own consequences. Somewhere in the city, Daniel Stokes was probably in a briefing or sipping coffee in a glass conference room, unaffected, undisturbed, already moved on. For him, this had been routine. For Patricia, it had been ruin. And as the city lights blurred past the window, she finally understood. Sometimes a few seconds of truth can undo a lifetime of pretending.